It is the 200 level, Mike Carpenter in the basement studio on a Wednesday afternoon ahead of game number 6. We're basically at the halfway point, which is a little bit hard to believe, but Illinois will take on Purdue this Saturday morning. I like them early kickoffs. I actually, the older I get, I prefer the early kickoffs. 11 a.m. Central Time at Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette. Now, one thing I'll say to start off, because I understand that there are concerns anytime you play Purdue, and that makes sense considering you've won 5 of the last 20. That's not good. I was thinking today about the recent weirdness against Purdue and really no good performances by Bret Bielema's team against them when you consider it, and thought, well, why is that? And it occurred to me that we can explain away most of what's happened in the last 4 years, though we have to do a little bit harder of a job of that for the 2024 near loss in overtime. But let's look at the 1-3 record that Bielema has against Purdue. Back in 2021, so this would have been Bielema's first year, you went into Purdue. It was a low-scoring affair. Your offense was terrible. It was the Tony Peterson year. I think you lost 10-9, something like that. You got overly conservative in the fourth quarter. I think you punted it when you had a 4th and 1 and could have just got the first down to win it, something like that. A couple tough losses in that first year for Bielema, but okay, fine. It was his first year, bad offense. You can live with that. 2022 is, of course, very hard to live with, the fact that if you beat them, you're in the Big Ten title game. So I won't excuse that, but I will say this was still Jeff Brom with an NFL quarterback, Aiden O'Connell. And yeah, they were better than you that day, and it sucked in every conceivable way, but it's not like that Purdue team was bad. 2023 was Ryan Walters' first year. None of us felt good going into that. It went terribly in the second half. It got away from you, and then the very next week, Illinois had their nadir against Nebraska at home. So that team was in the pits of an early season struggle fest, and it really went downhill in that second half. Last year, I can't really give you a good explanation. I mean, you were up 27-3, 28-3, and then everything else happened. But maybe that was Ryan Walters' last gasp. And he calls the plays, and backup quarterback Ryan Brown comes in, and you didn't scout him, and he just kind of runs roughshod over you. Okay, fine. Still not excusable, but it is what it is. My point in revisiting these games is to try to say, well, wait a second. Is there such a thing as a hex or a curse against Purdue? Or is it maybe time that we turn the page and turn this into a rivalry that really isn't a rivalry, the way these two programs are presently constructed? And what I mean by that is, one, the Ryan Walters bad blood, that's gone. Okay, Barry Odom and Bret Bielema are chummy. They must have been in coaching circles together. I'm not exactly sure the extent to which that's the case, but Bret Bielema speaks very highly of him. Okay, fine. So that's out of the way. Purdue is probably going to settle into a perpetual 4-8, 5-7 program. Whatever NIL resources they have, which are limited compared to Illinois' by all accounts, they're going to be putting into basketball and not football. So we'll see what Barry Odom can do, but I would imagine he'll be respectable enough. But a big threat, I'd be surprised the way that this NIL-driven college football is heading. That's one reason why I'm not thinking this is necessarily a continuation of past weirdness. Furthermore, look at the teams. I mean, just remove the jersey, remove the logos, remove the colors, and just look at the teams as they're presently constructed. The continuity on Illinois' side, which finally bore fruit against USC, is such an advantage against a team like Purdue, which is really, credit to Barry Odom, been very patchwork so far this year, but he's made it a lot better than you would expect a team of a bunch of first-year transfers and whatnot. So just look at the game and the matchup. And the third reason I feel optimistic going into this, first, to get rid of bad blood, 2, the matchup itself, but 3 is the fact that I think that the Indiana game is a major piece to this puzzle for this Illinois season, judging off of last week's performance. how can a team a week and a half removed now, and 2 weeks by the time they play Purdue, be fully past a 53-point loss against another team? I mean, the idea that Illinois at any point this season can have their chest puffed out too much is a little bit laughable. And this is where I'm banking on Bielema and this coaching staff for not allowing that to happen. I'm banking on the many veterans on this team not allowing that to happen. And finally, just getting sick of it. As Josh Kreutz essentially said, I'm paraphrasing here, but in Jeremy Warner's most recent article on Illini Inquirer, he said that, we just got sick of not playing the way we needed to. Okay, fine. And I would have asked, well, why didn't you do that sooner? But better late than never. I do feel there's carryover in that element that supersedes any sort of hangover game narrative. Because I would understand if you felt like trap game, you played well against USC, you got the big emotional win. There's bound to be a letdown. I get that on one hand. On the other, I feel sometimes like the trap game narrative, and many narratives for that matter, it's almost too easy to lean into, when in actuality, there might be more factors going in Illinois' favor than not in this game. Vegas currently has it as a 9.5-point spread. It's been fairly consistent after, I think, an early 11.5-point spread. That was maybe the opening, maybe 13.5 as high as that for some, but it's been pretty consistent this week, and I don't imagine it changing very much. I just feel like for Illinois in practice this week, did the USC game, instead of being some emotional win that took a lot out of him, was it maybe invigorating? I know it was for me. I would imagine for a fan base as well that didn't know what the heck to think after the Indiana game. That win against USC was invigorating and like, wait a second, we could still be good. And I think the team needed that reminder. I think we as fans needed that reminder. Coaching staff probably believed it and they said all the right things, but now you get an opportunity to go on the road where, apart from the Indiana game this year, yikes, this coaching staff has done pretty well in getting the team ready to go on the road. And it just strikes me as an opportunity to go in there and just win the way that a good team should. And that if you could do it at a Duke, a team that, the way their schedule shakes out, will likely win 8 or 9 games without breaking too much of a sweat. If you can do it there, you can certainly do it at Purdue. And maybe not need 5 takeaways in order to do so. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying the vibes are good from my perspective. And if I were to say, well, what is that worth after I thought we'd win at Indiana? Probably not a hill of beans. But I look back on that, and I think my prognostication for the Indiana game was based on the idea that they would finally put everything together. In other words, it was based on potential, not what I had actually seen for a sustained 60 minutes from that team. It was the idea that they would finally put it all together in the most high-stakes game of the year thus far. They didn't, and it actually got away from them. The value in that, I hope, is a complete recalibration, a complete reset, mentally speaking, for this team. Because while they didn't reinvent the wheel as far as X's and O's and schematics against USC, mentally speaking, that was a different team against the Trojans. And I really hope, and part of me truly thinks, that shellacking in Bloomington was, if not necessary, ultimately a very good thing for this team. Would I prefer to lose 38-24 instead? Yeah. And maybe you'd still get the same result. Did you have to lose by 53? I don't know if you did. I will never excuse that. But to respond the way that they did, I think is so heartening. And I think there can be carryover effect that goes beyond whatever hangover narratives we've seen a bajillion times, not to mention the battle for the cannon, which has not been very kind to this Illinois program. So that's how I wanted to start, a little bit of optimism, because I understand we see Purdue in the schedule. We're like, oh, God, not again. Is it going to be one of those weird games? And listen, last year was the worst win I've ever watched. I've never been more miserable during an Illini football win than I was last year against Purdue. Nothing comes close. My life, my sports fandom flashed before my eyes as Ryan Brown was rendered unstoppable against Aaron Henry's defense. And we'll talk about Aaron Henry right after the break. But I think it's okay if that's the aberration. It's okay to think that just because things have been weird in the past, that doesn't mean that it's going to be weird again Saturday. And that if Illinois goes in there, as they should, a veteran team that got their butts kicked 2 weeks ago, was humbled, and then responded accordingly, then this is a matchup that is very favorable for them. So let's get into it. Hello to those watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Hey, you throw out anything that you guys want to in this chat thread. I will get to it. And also, thank you guys for your patience as I work through this fatigued voice. It is certainly better than it was Tuesday and Monday, and I got through the podcast Sunday. But, Saturday did a number on me. Physically, my back is tweaked from setting up and turning on the tailgate. I got a shoulder thing, and my voice is shot. And some of you listeners in your fifth and sixth decades of life will scoff when I say this, but I'm damn near 40. I am not the spring chicken I was just even a few years ago. So, hey, this is not my flu game. This is not my Michael Jordan flu game, but thank you for listening despite not the most booming of voices from me. All right, I see it lighting up there in the chat thread, but before I get to that, want to hit up some of our sponsors. Best way you support us, 200 level, support our sponsors, including Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits. My wife and I just celebrated our anniversary there, and it was a 5-star experience. We got a bone-in steak. So they have this dinner for two sometimes on their specials. Bone-in 14-ounce steak for two. We got it medium. And the beauty is some of the parts were still a little bit medium rare, so it was still extra juicy. Had a crust, a black truffle crust on it, and a red wine sauce for dipping. My God. It was meat candy. This thing was meat candy. I'm not even the biggest steak person in the world, but when we do get to go to Hamilton Walkers, I get it because there's no other place in town that makes a steak like that. And it is truly just every morsel. I wanted to take my time eating this because when it was gone, it was gone. I even took a few off the bone. It was just that good. Hamilton Walkers, downtown Champaign. Appreciate them. State Farm agent Brian Hansen online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy. And he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. Long-term forecast says cold front moves in mid-next week. So cooler mornings and evenings. That time of year is coming. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but get that furnace check scheduled at 217-841-4728. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. And finally, Owen Builders, LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com for life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Wait, sorry. I just mixed it up with Brian Hansen. Good Lord, guys. That was a total brain fart. Let me start again for Luke and the guys at Owen Builders. They can do a variety of home projects, and there's a gallery of their work online, and you can get a free quote while you're there at owenbuildersllc.com. Man, sorry, Luke. I kind of had a little brain fart there. I'm so used to reading these live reads from our four sponsors, and I personally appreciate all of them because it's been multiple years for basically all of them. And I will tell you this too. They are all local. They're all Illini fans. You're supporting good people when you support them. So thanks to all of them. And thanks to you listening, watching, wherever you do. And for those that are there right now, like, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you're watching on. Okay. I want to get to the comments here in a bit, but before I do, I want to start with some Aaron Henry conversation. Because if there is an area of concern going into Saturday, I don't think it's Barry Lunney and Luke Altmaier. Chances are the offense will score 30-plus points. That's what they've been doing on a pretty regular basis for the last 10 games. The exceptions being Indiana and South Carolina. We can excuse South Carolina because that was a really good defense. Apparently not a very good offense because Lenore Sellers ain't all that this year. South Carolina has struggled. Maybe we broke him. I don't know. But, we thought, man, that was Aaron Henry's A-plus performance. Well, now we're waiting to see how good Lenore Sellers actually is now that there's tape on him. It was a good game called by Aaron Henry. I shouldn't say that. It's not taking anything away from him. But offense is going to get theirs. Okay, fine. This can be a blowout if the defense allows it to be. this can be a blowout. But the question, of course, is, can the defense consistently stop opposing offenses? Now, the good news is this. Let's start with a fact. Jaden Maeva and Fernando Mendoza are two of the best quarterbacks in the country. The stats back that up. The metrics back that up. And now you're starting to get the buzz for Mendoza as a, black horse candidate for Heisman. Maeva, before the loss to Illinois, was considered roundly a top 5 quarterback in the nation. And I don't think there's anything we saw against Illinois that would make you think less of him, because he made some throws that, even if they were decently defended, fit into a tight window that only pro-level quarterbacks can do. So there is no doubt that Aaron Henry's defenses have faced not just 2 really good quarterbacks, but I'll throw Darian Menza in the mix and say that game right there is probably the best you can hope for from an Aaron Henry defense this year. And that is what we saw for the first half against USC. It's why I want to start with this. I'm not sold that this defense is bad. I don't know if that was a roundabout way of saying it. Let me just make it simpler. I think they can still be good. And if you were to ask, what is good? What does good look like? Well, for a team that can score 30-plus points a game, good is someone that, a defense that gives up 400 yards and 20 to 24 points against Big Ten competition, right? Limiting the 30-plus performances, limiting the 500-plus yards. Yeah, USC got that. Indiana certainly got that. Though I'll argue in the defense of the defense that they were not the reason that game got away from you early on, but certainly by the time the second half rolled around, they looked like that scene from Gone with the Wind. I mean, you had bodies in open field triage. You might as well have had Torrey Cox on a stretcher at the 40-yard line just begging for iodine. Is it iodine? So I'm not sold they can't be good. I'm also not sold on Aaron Henry as certainly not an elite defensive coordinator, but I'm not sold on him just yet as someone that I can rely on as a fan to say, well, if push comes to shove in the fourth quarter and that defense is going to stop, he's going to draw something up. With him, it seems to be very much a macro kind of coming up with a game plan that works, and let's hope it works for 4 quarters. But that if things start to go awry, it's difficult for him to dial it back in. We saw that in the last quarter and a half against USC. They could not stop anything USC was throwing at you, and the big plays were starting to pile up too. The miscommunication was starting to pile up as well. But then, on the other hand, you have these 4-quarter performances from the defense in the last year or so that make you say, well, there's an identity here, and it's not an elite defense, but he's actually, drawing up something pretty good. I mean, it's been effective more times than it is not. I think the concern, though, fairly, is that it's like, 60% effective, 40% not. And for you to have a very good season, it feels like that calculus has to change a little bit. You wish that you could count on that defense 75% of the time. And I know Xavier Scott is out, but most everybody else is there. So we can't use the injury thing. We also right now can't point to secondary development and say that that is a strength of this team, because I know that there were some green guys playing last week, but there were certain plays like a Caleb Patterson. I don't know what's happened to him, but he is as ineffective of a cornerback as you could get right now. I think back to the end of the Ron Turner era, and I know he ended up making the NFL, but poor Alan Ball, often left on an island with an 8-yard cushion. Alan Ball was like the butt of jokes in the East Balcony where my dad and I used to sit. We thought, oh, God, it's a 3rd and 8. Watch Alan Ball. Yep, gave up the first down. Caleb Patterson has been rendered completely ineffective. Can't even make plays on the ball. Not even what's right in front of him. So what's that about? For Aaron Henry, a guy that's a secondary teacher, one that's been that kind of position coach for a while before he got the coordinating job. And for Corey Parker, who is just a bundle of energy, the same way that I was calling out Barton Miller after Indiana, like most people were, I think we got to start doing that with Aaron Henry and Corey Parker for that secondary. It's got to be better. I don't have as many concerns with the front 6, or depending on the formation, front 7. Let's call it the defensive front. However many linebackers and down linemen you have out there and edge rushers. I don't have as many concerns about them. And I know they could have gotten the quarterback more, but that's a good USC offensive line. That's a slippery Jaden Maeva. So I can excuse that part for the defensive front. I can't excuse 3rd and 16, 3rd and 14, a 4th and 6, a 4th and 4. Make a damn stop. And as fun as that dramatic win was, and as good of a chance as you gave yourself because you have a Luke Altmaier and you got the golden foot of David Olano, it still required everything to go right in that last minute 55. It doesn't and should not have to as we go forward in the season. This team can have its cake and eat it too if the defense does not get in its way. Because I think we would all pretty roundly agree the offense is finding something. The offense may have found something against USC. Now, the run game was consistent. They're going to be fine. It is difficult to imagine a game where the offense loses you the game, but unfortunately at the moment, it is conceivable that the defense could. That scares me. So what am I looking for or asking for of Aaron Henry in this defense? Well, the first thing, I think it is fair to say that Matt Bailey was not there in the second half against USC, and that had an impact. So let's not dismiss the impact of losing him. And yeah, credit to Sabor Kareem. Came in, made a lot of tackles. On the other hand, do you really want your boundary safety having to make a bunch of tackles? Maybe that does say something about the defensive line or defensive front. But Matt Bailey's a difference maker. We know that. There are certain guys you feel comfortable with. I feel comfortable enough with Miles Scott. I feel fine with the safeties. I know Tanner Heckel took his lumps, but that's going to happen. It happened to Xavier Scott. It happened. Quan Martin, again, not, I don't want to say punchline, because there weren't enough people in the stands to necessarily make jokes about it, but Quan Martin made plenty of bad plays his first couple of years. It took reps. I think Tanner Heckel is going to be pretty darn good. But all that said, as a collective, cohesive unit, the secondary is not cutting it. So it's got to be better. I think it can be better. I think you can see performance against Purdue akin to Duke. And the thing is, Ryan Brown, despite what he did against Illinois last year, is not Darian Menza. This, to me, is a show-me game for Aaron Henry. There is no conceivable reason why Purdue should score more than 20 points if you have a good defense. Again, not asking for great, not asking for elite, simply good. So this is it, Aaron. Like, you have got to show up this weekend, and this unit has got to show up so we don't have that Purdue weirdness that we've grown accustomed to. It doesn't have to happen. It didn't have to happen last year. But that game got away from you. It can't anymore. And it's weird, man. Maybe this is, you know that I am not fond of the idea of a coordinator learning on the job. In other words, I know that in theory that makes sense. Everybody learns on the job. As a teacher, I'm better in year 8 than I was year 1. But this is also high-level college football, and I don't need this to be a training ground for a coordinator. Position coach is fine. Coordinators, not so much. Yet Aaron Henry has had some awesome games in his time here. He's capable of it. I think Saturday is important for how we feel about the defense going forward, because Purdue's not good. But their offense is pesky enough where if you play well against them defensively, you can transpose that a little bit, especially to the games in November. The Big Ten teams you play in November aren't great. They don't have great offenses. But I don't know. I mean, this on Saturday is a pretty good indicator of what you should do against teams that are lesser than you. So, Aaron, come on. Let's have your unit's best performance of the year. If so, this is a game that you can win by a few scores. Because I feel pretty good about the other two units. I know special teams sucked at Indiana. They picked it right back up last week. I know offense is bad at Indiana. They picked it right back up last week. Barry Odom is not Kurt Signetti. He's fine. But this is a game where you need to look like a good defense. I think they will. And the reason I feel fairly confident about that is I still think the run defense is solid. And I also think Aaron Henry, it's funny, we talked about, well, running quarterbacks have killed them. Not really. Not really. they bottle up the running part of it. So you force Ryan Brown, now that there's been a year's worth of tape on him, you force him to be a passer, and he can make some throws for sure. He's not bad. But it does negate his biggest strength, which is his legs, and he used that against Illinois last year. So, yeah, that was actually, oddly enough, the aberration last year of running quarterbacks. Every other one Aaron Henry did pretty well against. So I keep seeing that narrative, and I'm thinking that's actually one of his strengths as a coordinator. He finds a way to bottle them up. Needs to do it Saturday. Get it done. Feel good about it. And then set yourselves up for a huge week next week. Notice, we've not talked about Ohio State today because Purdue's not a gimme. Illinois is not at a talent level where games against Big Ten teams are gimmies. UCLA might be an exception if we had them on the schedule this year, and hopefully they will be that next year when we go into the Rose Bowl. But no, Illinois doesn't have gimmies. And Purdue is for certain, better coached this year than they were last year. But it is still a team and a roster that is welcoming in a bunch of new guys. And if you were to say, well, Carp, I mean, they scored 30 against Notre Dame. I don't know what Notre Dame's defense's deal was early this year, but they couldn't stop anything. USC, 31-17 win. One touchdown for Purdue was a total fluke play. So other than that, they pretty well bottled up Purdue's offense. Aaron, defensive staff, get it done. Get it done. If Purdue gets more than 20, I'm worried. And not just about Ohio State, because Ohio State's Ohio State. I'm worried that they will hamstring your ability to get the 9, maybe 10 wins that this team, based on the offense and special teams, are capable of. I would be bummed, frustrated, actually, not just bummed, but frustrated if that is the case. So it starts Saturday, I think. I say all that, and they still played well in the first 2.5 quarters against USC. So listen, you do that, right? What they did against USC for the first 35 minutes of the game, then you're going to win Saturday. If you do what you did the last 20, it could be tight. And that's why you don't see the spread going crazy. It's not because the offense. The over-under is 57.5. That tells you what Vegas thinks about scoring in this game. Well, be a defense that doesn't allow that over to get touched while your offense can still get their 30-some. All right, let's get to the live feed here. We got some comments from Anthony. Glad to catch you live finally. Hello, Anthony. I forget if you're a Cubs fan or not. By the way, Cubs fans, you're probably not here live. Your team is playing in the playoffs. Good luck to you. I do truly hope the Cubs make it to the NLDS. Yankees just piss me off to no end. Aaron Boone is an abysmal manager, and we'll see what happens tonight. And hello to Stephen Colbert. Still looking for a new gig. Good luck to you, Stephen. Back to Anthony. Turn the page. I want to get away from cursed Illini story. We aren't cursed. And I think this was in reference, Anthony, to the weirdness of the Purdue rivalry and this idea that, okay, well, not idea. We have lost 15 of 20 against Purdue. Can we simplify that a little bit, though? We say that. And I know they had the Darrell Hazel era. And who was the guy? Danny Hope. That's not good. But we also had the Tim Beckman and the Lovie Smith era and the tail end of Ron Zook and the tail end of Ron Turner. I look at that record as an indication that Illinois football sucked for the last 20 plus years, mostly. We are changing that trend. I don't know why it has taken Bret Bielema longer than other Big Ten teams to kind of get rid of whatever hex may have existed. Why Purdue, of all teams, to be the pesky one that you can't figure out? But I do think these things can be figured out, and they can become a distant memory. I think it starts Saturday. And I think that there's probably quite a bit, if you look at the last 2 years against Purdue, because so many guys on this team were on the last two teams, maybe a few on 2022, and that was the most devastating loss of all. But the fact that if you were on this team and you went through the last two Purdue games, you're thinking, could we actually, enough of this crap. See, I'm about to say the S word, but it's a family-friendly podcast, usually. Enough of this. Let's win convincingly. Stop messing around with Purdue and beat their butt and keep the trophy. Maybe now that they've gotten the trophy, that there's these weird things sometimes with rivalry games where you got to get over the hump. In order to get over the hump, it's it's tough sledding. It's a 1-point win. It's like it was last year against Purdue. And then maybe relax. Maybe the floodgates can open a little bit and you can come out unencumbered by previous disappointments and just win convincingly. So that's the hope, at least for me. All right, this is from Billy. I'm willing to boil the last 2 years down to Ryan Walters knew our defense better than Henry did. There's a factor to that, Billy. Ryan Walters, who we will face in Washington. Go away, Ryan. Yeah, there is a benefit in knowing some of the opposing personnel and the opposing defense, or at least what the opposing defense would like to run, and capitalizing on that. That's probably why he was able to call plays somewhat effectively offensively last year. Credit to him, man. I mean, that took cojones to say, just screw it. Give me the playbook. I'm just calling it. He did so effectively. Ryan Brown ran that effectively. There was clearly a lot of bad blood between him and Bret Bielema, and I don't think that's ever going to be repaired. And I also look at that as that was not, oddly enough, a benefit to Bret Bielema. I would have thought, going into last year's Purdue game, I think we all thought this, revenge. He's going to get revenge on Ryan Walters, whose team is struggling. But honestly, sometimes emotion can get the best of you. It can actually muddle what you really want to do. Now that you remove the personal angst from this rivalry, I think that's a benefit to this team, and they can just focus on the on-field aspect of it, which hasn't been good enough and needs to be better against Purdue. And they don't need to, get any sort of mind games with a coach on the other sideline that many of them had played under. That's gone. So I think that is going to lead to maybe more clear heads, more focus, and yeah, you can get bogged down in anything, sports or life. You can get bogged down in this idea of vengeance. It's not particularly helpful. This is about vengeance. This is just about do your job, keep the trophy, kick their butt. Whereas Ryan Walters, he's halfway across the country. So that factor should, I think, actually be a benefit in this game. The fact that he's not a factor should be a benefit for Illinois in this game. From Jacob, 8 players out in the secondary in the second half versus Indiana. Not saying we would have won, but it would have been closer. Yeah, I mean, Jacob, that game got away from all 3 units of Illinois. All 3 of them were bad. I thought the defense was fine in the first quarter. And you'd say, well, Carp, there's 3 quarters. Almost sounds like I'm Tim Beckman. We were 17 plays away from winning the game. That Illinois team was probably 50 plays away from winning that Indiana game. But I will say, I didn't, after all that, pin it on Aaron Henry any more than I did any other coach. So to your point, Jacob, I don't look at that so much as I did the very end of the USC game. And part of the reason why I'm why I'm overall optimistic about Saturday is the Duke game, I think, was the template of what this defense can be. And 5 takeaways is unlikely. But a couple, that's likely. And that's not Darian Menza over there. And they don't have an NFL wide receiver like Duke has, whose name escapes me. They don't have Max Clare, who killed you last year in that matchup here. Tight end who's now with Ohio State, and you're going to see in 2 weeks. But I look at all those and think, the Duke thing can be the template. By the way, Xavier Scott was not particularly great in that Duke game. That's not to say you don't want Xavier Scott out there. You want him on that field, but you don't have him. Okay, fine. You got to patchwork this thing a little bit, but you still have enough where if the secondary is struggling, I can't say, man, injury-plagued defense. No, it's not. At the moment, it is not an injury-plagued defense. Like, this is going to be game 6. This is not week 1 or 2. We are halfway through a season. There are injuries. Every team has them. He has enough at his disposal to be better. I imagine that they will be better on Saturday. From Anthony, I think it'll be weird, but I think Illinois will win in classic Bret fashion by 1 or 2 touchdowns. I hope, Anthony, that there's no weirdness. I hope to God, just win the game. None of this, please, God, just give me, you know what my favorite one at Purdue was, oddly enough, there's 2. Let's think positive here for a second. 2019, rainy 20-6 win at Purdue. It was the week after Illinois beat Wisconsin at home, which I didn't see that game. I was at a friend's wedding, assuming that the 20-plus point Wisconsin favorites would kick our butt, and they did not, and we won on a field goal. Holy moly, can we follow it up at Purdue? And they did in very Lovie Smith fashion. Good Lovie Smith fashion. My favorite, 2001. Illinois went into halftime trailing 17-7 or something. Kirk Kittner, I think, threw 4 picks in the first half, or at least had 4 turnovers. I mean, it was Rex Grossman at Arizona Cardinals 2006 levels of bad from Kirk Kittner. Second half, ran roughshod all over Purdue's defense. I think ended up winning 38-17, 38-13 maybe. It was a crazy second half performance and such a great adjustment by that offense. And I say adjustment, it was just Kirk Kittner saying, enough. I need to stop messing around. I got 4 NFL wide receivers. Let's do this right. And he did. So, Anthony, I'm hoping for no weirdness. It's just, blech. I think that I hope last year was the absolute apex of canon rivalry game weirdness. From Andy, I really think that the O-line is going to be able to dominate the Purdue D-line. Should be another day where we can get what we want offensively. Andy, this goes to my point and why I'm optimistic about the Indiana game being a motivating factor for the rest of the year. It was so bad, Andy, that the offensive line had really no choice but to be better. And I think the way in which they responded against the USC defensive line that had, I think, the most tackles for loss in the country. And I know not a great schedule they had played against, but nonetheless, they got dudes. They got dudes that are probably better than what you're going to face at Purdue. Now, the question, Andy, will be, can you maintain that mindset against Purdue? Can you be the same offensive line for 60 minutes when you know the guys across from you on that Purdue defensive line are not going to give you the same test physically as USC? That's the mental component here. And I would hope for 5 guys returning on that offensive line, they can keep that edge. If they do, Andy, this is not going to be a close game. What would make this a close game is if you start reverting to the things we saw earlier in the season. And it's not as if every problem was fixed against USC, but the offense was damn near flawless. And I know that's a big word. And it might sound ridiculous to say for an offense to fumble twice inside the 5, but I chalk that up more to 2 individuals, one of which Caden did not fumble it. So let's just cut the bullshit. He didn't fumble it. Okay. Because it's not our fault that refs are inept and absolutely turn what should have been what is a classic game, but it didn't have to be 4 hours. It could have been 3.5. They just had to make a big freaking show of it, but I digress. And the one from Khalil was bad. You got to protect it. I don't care how good the punch out is. You got to protect it. Okay, fine. The offense as a whole, as a unit, was flawless essentially against USC with 2 exceptions. Well, 3. The 2 fumbles, and then you did have a 3-and-out. If I recall, that wasn't long after Luke got rocked. And he had an errant 2nd and 3rd down out pattern. You punt it. Decent punt from Cremens. See, he hasn't punted hardly at all this year, except the Indiana game, and we all want to forget that. But, yeah, I do think, Andy, this is just a simple case of be who you were against USC. Yeah, I would use that D word, dominate. You dominated USC's defense. I know that's not their strength, but it's certainly not Purdue's. Purdue is pesky because they have an offense that can score, not because they have a stingy defense. So if the offensive line does what they did against USC, yeah, I'm in total agreement with you on that, Andy. St. Dominic, you're the man. And you don't need to no need for this, but I appreciate this message from you. You were right, and I was wrong about USC and Bret. Well, hey, trust me, St. Dominic, I'm all too happy that they won, but the last thing I thought about in the lot was, that son of a bitch, St. Dominic's Rosary. I showed him. No, because here's the thing. You raise an interesting point, St. Dominic, and I understand someone maybe look at the idea of Bret's not our guy as some sort of blasphemy, but I do think it is fair to criticize coaches even after they've achieved a level of success, because that Indiana game was so beyond explanation that it was okay if you felt a little shaky knees and jittery about where things were going. That was jarring. And in fairness to St. Dominic, I made that call based on gut. I mean, there was nothing logically that said Illinois was going to beat USC. There really wasn't. Every flaw that was exposed in your defense. And yes, injuries played a role against Indiana, but every flaw should have been exploited by USC. And to Aaron Henry's credit, they weren't for a quarter, 2 quarters and a half. And there was nothing from the offense to suggest they would play 60 full minutes of awesome offense, but they did. And that, to me, St. Dominic is really just sports in a nutshell. It's just why we love it the way that we do is because you can continually get surprised. No matter how many years you watch it, you can continually be surprised how things can change from one day to the next or 1 week to the next in the case of football. And that was just one of those where I thought, Illinois wins, and I can't tell you why. My head said, nah, come on. And my gut said, no, they're winning this game. And they almost didn't, thanks to those ill-timed turnovers and Aaron Henry's defense really struggling late, but they did. And they were the better team, and there was nothing fluky about that win. I mean, anyone that watched it walked out of that saying, Illinois looked better than USC because they did. So that's crazy how it is, St. Dominic. And I was going gut. Yeah, I'm not Nostracarpus. I am not an expert at this. I make as many bad calls as good ones, I'm sure. Also from St. Dominic's, USC fans are a bunch of sore losers. Now they're saying they got food poisoning. Yes, this has been a fun little thing emerging on Twitter for those that don't do the Twitter thing. I don't have it on my phone anymore. And you may have noticed I don't really tweet anymore. That's one of the easiest choices I ever made. I'm not the best tweeter for one, and two, it's a cesspool. But, well, maybe case in point, there is a burgeoning conspiracy theory, if you will, from USC fans, or at least some of the USC talking heads on Twitter, that some of their defense was food poisoned, and that's why they were so ineffective against Illinois. Hey, whatever. I mean, that would certainly have an impact, but there is no proof of such a thing existing. And what, are we going to say that the chefs at iHotel were in cahoots with the Illinois football team? I don't know. It is funny, though. And isn't it nice when the shoe's on the other foot and you can watch a team that you just beat kind of have this existential crisis like South Carolina did last year? And look at those suckers. I mean, they're not good this year. You could say, well, don't you want South Carolina to be good, to somehow validate? No, I was at the game. It was fun. We won the game. I could give a crap what South Carolina does after that game. And I said that before in this podcast too. I'm only going to read into Purdue as much as I need to know going into the game. I'm not going to learn their roster. I'm not going to listen to prognosticators. I don't care. I'm an Illinois fan. You're one of 12 teams we play. You're 3.5 hours of my life. And then I won't know any of you other than Devin Mockabee, who apparently is a 28-year-old super senior and just won't leave. I think he's actually a regular senior, but God dang if it doesn't seem like that guy's been there forever. Trust me, I see the name Mockabee and I'm like, oh God, are we doing this again? Are we really doing this Purdue thing again? Trust, I'm not fully immune from the idea that this could be a weird game. I think though, despite the Mockabee and the Ryan Brown thing, I don't have that same, oh God, just whatever you do, Illinois, don't lose. And I'll be honest with you. I recall distinctly last year, the Purdue game coincided with parent-teacher conferences in the Champaign School District. And on those Thursday mornings before we have evening conferences, we do professional development meetings. And that was when the Hudson Card news was coming out. And I'll be honest, I was looking for any angle I could to convince myself 100% we are not losing this game. Because in my mind, it was like this gut, kind of uneasiness that, well, what if we don't have this locked up? I know that we're 4-1. We got Michigan coming to town next week, so all we got to do is win. But man, it's Purdue, and were you the same way? Did you have a little bit of anxiety going into that game, despite the fact that Purdue and all the metrics said that they stunk? I did. I still did. And trust me, that's why I say that second half was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. So I don't have that this year. Thank goodness Ryan Walters is gone. Him and his huge bulging biceps and his 2 small t-shirts. And I say that as someone that, like, I wear t-shirts. I don't wear big billowing t-shirts. Okay. So I shouldn't maybe criticize someone for the fit of their t-shirts, but this guy is like, look at me. We get it, Ryan. You lift weights. You're a young man. I don't want to say anything slanderous about your extracurricular activities that may or may not have been hinted at while you were at Purdue. But regardless, enough. I'm so glad that he's on the other side of the country. Just annoyed the crap out of me. Stephen Colbert. That whole Ryan Walters thing was so weird. Yes, it was, Stephen, and I'm just kind of done with it. And you didn't know he was at Washington. Yes, he's at Washington, so we'll see him. More from St. Dominic. The issue with Purdue over the years, if Jeff Brom is a great offensive head coach, Purdue was out-recruiting Illinois under Lovie. Bret had to deal with Brom, then trader Ryan Walters knew our plays. Trader Ryan Walters. You know what? In fairness to him, St. Dominic, it was a Big Ten gig. He had to take it. But I think... was the timing wrong? Well, clearly the timing was wrong. And would it have been foolish of him to not take that job? Probably. But I think, even Jeremy, who was much more in tune with that coaching staff, seemed to call that one out from right away. And I thought to myself, there's a small chance that he could be like a phenom and this works out wonderfully. But no, I think the writing was on the wall for that. From St. Dominic, it's time for Purdue to get right game to be the get right game for the foreseeable future. I'm tired of struggling against these guys. Jeff Brom had things rolling at Purdue. I blame Lovie. Yeah, I think actually, St. Dom, can I call you that for short? Or just Dom? Jeff Brom's a really good coach. So if we really want to boil this down to why did Illinois struggle as much as they did, not even last 20, but last 10 years, Jeff Brom was a good coach. Barry Odom is all right. He did okay at Missouri. He did really well at UNLV. But they are in an era now where they need more resources if they truly want to compete in the Big Ten. They aren't there yet. This could be a year where if they go 4-8, that is a fantastic job by Barry Odom. And they're 2 wins already. Okay, so that they can do that. But it's going to be a struggle. And it should be a struggle for them Saturday. If it's not, I have questions about, well, come on, coaching staff, what were you guys doing? But let's keep it positive here. From Andy, my expectations are still this where they were at the beginning of the year. Always thought going 2-1 between Duke, Indiana, and USC was the goal. Then take your shot against Ohio State. Andy, let's end on that. I 100% agree and said the same exact thing, and probably would have predicted the same outcome as you. That the more likely of those wins, the more likely ones were at Duke and USC at home. And then Indiana, if we were to rank them, was probably going to be the toughest. Well, sure enough, it was, even though I felt good about it going in. Whoops, not even close. So I think that, yes, let's remind ourselves, you're right where you were or wanted to be. Now, that one loss, of course, is a big old matzo ball of a 53-point shellacking, and that makes you go, well, what was that all about? Does that mean something more than just one loss? And it was fair to be freaked out by it because I was a little freaked out too and thought, man, this USC game all of a sudden became almost program defining, which is so hyperbolic. But I think part of the reason there was such joy in the lots afterwards was, boy, we needed that. We really, really needed that. And they got it. And that leads me, Andy, to this idea I mentioned earlier in the podcast. I think that instead of this being an emotional hangover, that could have been the big exhale they needed to say, okay, that's right, we are good, but in order to be what we want to be and in order to go where we want to go, we have to play like that. They're capable of it. And if they continue to play like that, they're going to win a lot of games this year. They could go 10-2. If they play like they did against USC for the most part, because the offense looked top 20 in the country good. They did, and I think they can be because you have receivers that are a lot better than you probably thought, and finally an offensive line that looked like what we thought they would be going into this year. If the defense can be just good, then 10-2 is right there. That might sound ridiculous after losing by 53 points to Indiana, but at the end of the day, to forget the cliche, but one loss is just one loss. It is up to this team if they're going to make that cliche actually true. And I hope that the absolute dredges of what happened that night in Indiana were not just a really big asterisk or outlier on the schedule, but really the catalyst for this team figuring out what they had to do. It's human beings out there as players and coaches, and that might sound a little bit like, oh, Christ, Carp, don't get all wishy-washy on us. But what I mean by that is we are all very flawed individuals, and motivation and inspiration come in very different forms and at different times. And to conjure that up for a group of 90 student athletes on a week-to-week basis, I'm assuming is super difficult. That's why if you were to ask what is the most difficult part of the job for these coaches, like a Bret Bielema, I would imagine it is somehow getting all of these guys, all these 18 to 22-year-olds going through what is a crazy-ass part of life anyway, to be on the same page and for all of them to do their job. I think one of the reasons why football is so fascinating and why it's so fun to watch when you really get into it is that every single play, it's 11 guys versus 11 guys, and they all have a job to do. And if one guy doesn't do it, the rest of that unit looks like shit. And that is a fascinating thing to me. Basketball, you could have a black hole on defense or offense and maybe get away with it as long as one guy is just that super special. Not really the case with football. And to see the response from the units that were out there for Illinois against USC, that to me really spoke to this idea that the pieces were there. But on that fateful night in Bloomington, it was the worst case scenario for every unit in every quarter in every conceivable way. Okay. Did we wash the stink out? Was that the detoxifying moment that this team needed, starting with USC, to play the way that they had probably wanted to and anticipated that they would going into this season? It's why I'm confident about Saturday. It's why if you said, what's the prediction? I'm going to go 38-17. And if that sounds outlandish, I understand. And if that seems like, Carp, have you been watching these Illinois Purdue games? Yeah, I have. They've sucked. I hate this rivalry. Up to this point, I hate it. And I'm not just predicting 38-17 because that's what I want to happen. Of course, I want it to happen. I'm predicting it because I think that this team, if a corner were to have been turned, it got turned in maybe an unorthodox way. It got turned that night in Bloomington, and they learned everything what not to do. And for them, within a week's time, to say, well, this is what we actually have to do. And for the most part, execute that on 2 units of the field to perfection, at least. I think that bodes well going into a game against Purdue that, yes, they had the bye week. Yes, they had extra time to rest up, recuperate. That's a factor for sure. But I also think this early enough in the year, it ain't bad to maybe just keep playing. Now that you have that good taste in your mouth, keep that going. I don't think a bye week right now would be a great spot for Illinois. Not after you got a win like that, and you really got the offense and the offensive line in particular going. I think you want to get back out there. And I think for the defense, too, why I go with 38-17 is despite that win against USC, there is a prove it mindset, I hope, that is percolating over there at the Smith Center this week, especially for Aaron Henry in that defense. 38 points for Barry Lunny in this offense against this Purdue team. That should be doable. 17 points for given up by Aaron Henry in this defense against this Purdue offense after what they did last year. That might sound like a steep mountain to climb, but I'm sorry. It's time. Show up for 4 quarters. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be great. You just need to be good. And if USC can hold you to 10 basically regular points and then a touchdown that got them to 17 was just, again, a really weird play if you go back and watch it, then you damn well be able to do the same. I'm sorry. You better be able to do the same against Purdue. So let's get it done. I'm 38-17. That's my prediction. And fingers crossed for limited weirdness. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. Before you go, we got about 150 people between the 3 platforms here, so I appreciate you. Before you guys go, do me a favor, like, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're watching on. My voice held up for the most part, so thank you for your patience with that. I'm going to be back Sunday. Not going to do a post, I believe, on Saturday because trying to convince the wife to go see it'd be my second time, but one battle after another. Just an incredible movie. And there's a showing in town that we would get to not too long after the game. So I think I'm going to wait until Sunday. Then I go collect my thoughts anyway. And hopefully we can talk about an Ohio State game week where you were 5-1, feeling really good about where you're at. And that's what you wanted. It's right there in front of you for this team. I think they know that. I think this is a take care of business kind of game, and one where it's all about fine-tuning things and being at your absolute peak for the test next week. You could say don't look ahead. Sure. Well, you got a lot of juniors and seniors on this team. And you got a lot of juniors and seniors that lost to Purdue 2 years ago in convincing fashion, including Luke Altmaier, who stunk it up over there. And then you got last year where you had him beat, you had him dead to rights, and then you let him get back in it and almost win the damn thing. This is a statement game for this team. I'm glad it's a trophy game. I'm glad that you play after USC, and I'm glad that you can keep this thing rolling. The bye week can come later. Keep playing. I think that's what's best for the team right now. I think it will show on Saturday. Before we get out of here, got to thank our sponsors, Hamilton Walkers in downtown Champaign. Steak, seafood, and spirits. Give them a try after the game next Saturday. Hey, Ohio State, it'll be packed in town, but I think a really good spot. So many people go right to campus. You go to Hamilton Walkers after the game, get a celebratory, could you imagine? A celebratory old-fashioned if you do, in fact, beat the number one team in the country. And I cannot rave about their food enough. Just had it a few nights ago. It's the best restaurant in Champaign-Urbana, hands down. Hamilton Walkers. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728 and get that furnace check scheduled. And finally, Luke, I'm going to get this one right, Owen Builders, LLC. For your next home improvement project, check out a gallery of their work online and get a free quote while you're there at Owen Builders, LLC. Thanks to those in the chat thread. Appreciate y'all. And again, we'll see you Sunday. Hopefully a win to talk about. No, Purdue's not awful. They aren't. And Illinois needs to play well if you don't want to sweat this thing out. But I do think Illinois shows up in a big way and just keep stacking wins, man. There are a lot of opportunities to stack wins this season, and Saturday is one of those. So let's get it done. In the meantime, everybody, have a great rest of your week, and we will see you on Sunday. It is the 200 level.